All right, let's talk about something that feels, well, uniquely modern. It's that feeling of being completely crushed by an avalanche of options. And maybe, just maybe, we can figure out how to find a little meaning when it feels like you can have absolutely anything you want.
I mean, come on, you've been there, right? You fire up Netflix, ready to relax, and you just scroll. And scroll, and scroll, and after what, 20 minutes, you just give up and watch nothing. The thing is, this isn't just about TV. It's kind of like a perfect snapshot of how we deal with almost every decision these days.
And this quote from Barry Schwartz's book, The Paradox of Choice, just nails it. Buying a pair of pants should not be a day-long project. I mean, seriously, when something as simple as buying jeans turns into this massive research project, you have to think something's gone a little bit wrong, right? We've been sold this bill of goods that more choice is always better. But is it really?
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, let's try a little thought experiment. Just imagine your life is a giant supermarket, and everything, I mean everything, from your career to your relationships, is just another product sitting on an infinitely long shelf.
So, let's take a little walk down these aisles, shall we? Let's see how this crazy overload actually shows up day to day.
Okay, first stop, the entertainment aisle. And wow, is it overflowing. I mean, think about it. We went from having, a handful of TV channels to a whole universe of streaming services. And every single one is demanding our time and, of course, our money.
And that cost, yeah, it's really starting to add up. Get this. According to some data from Deloitte, the average household that subscribes to these things is now shelling out $69 a month just on streaming video. That's a 13% jump in just 1 year.
But here's the real paradox. Even as we're paying more and more, our satisfaction is actually dropping. A staggering 41% of people say the stuff they're paying for just isn't worth the price. So we have access to literally everything, but it feels like we value it less and less.
All right, let's move on. We're heading to a different aisle now, and this one gets a lot more personal. See, that whole supermarket idea gets way more complicated when the products on the shelf are other human beings.
So, in this relationship aisle, a study from the University of Geneva found something pretty wild. Turns out nearly half the people on dating apps, they're not even really looking for a partner. Nope, they're just there for a quick hit of validation, a little ego boost. And all that endless swiping just leads to total fatigue and emotional burnout.
Okay, so we've seen where this all happens, but the big question is, why? Why does having more choice actually make us feel worse? To get that, we need to dive into the psychology behind it, the psychology of paralysis.
And yeah, there's a name for this feeling. It's called overchoice. It's basically that breaking point where all the good stuff about having options, the diversity, the personalization, it just gets completely canceled out by the sheer stress of having to make the decision.
So the researcher Barry Schwartz breaks this down really well. He says there are basically two types of decision makers. First, you've got the maximizer. This is the person who feels this intense pressure to find the absolute number one, perfect, best option. And it's exhausting. Then you have the satisficer. They're just looking for something that's good enough. And guess what? They're usually a whole lot happier with what they end up with.
So, let's think about this. What do you think happens when you take a maximizer, someone totally obsessed with finding that perfect choice, and you drop them right into our endless supermarket of overchoice?
Well, you get a recipe for disaster. It's a really toxic combination. First, you get decision paralysis. You just freeze up. You can't decide on anything. Then, even if you do manage to pick something, you're haunted by the ghosts of all those other options you left behind. And that leads straight to regret and, ultimately, dissatisfaction.
I know, that sounds pretty bleak. But don't worry, there is a way out. And it involves a really powerful shift in how we see things. Basically moving away from just owning stuff and moving toward actually experiencing life.
Check this out. There is this really clever study that shows this perfectly. They gave people either a pen, a material thing, or a bag of potato chips, an experience. Now, when they showed the pen people a bunch of better pens, their satisfaction with the one they had just plummeted. But the people eating the chips, their enjoyment wasn't affected at all by comparison. It was their experience.
And this just illustrates the main point so brilliantly. We are what we do, not what we have. Our experiences, they become a part of who we are, a part of our identity, in a way that stuff just doesn't. They're not as vulnerable to that nagging comparison, and our happiness with them can actually grow over time as we look back on them.
And this all leads us to our final and I think most empowering idea. The real antidote to being just another overwhelmed consumer is to stop mindlessly consuming and instead to become the curator of your own life.
You know, it's interesting. The word curate actually comes from the Latin word curar, which means to care for. So this isn't just about picking things out. It's about intentionally choosing what you truly want to care for, what's really worthy of your time and your attention.
So how do we actually do this? Well, we can start by investing in memorable experiences instead of just buying more stuff. We can practice what you might call mindful spending, really asking ourselves, does this actually add value to my life? We can learn to embrace good enough and try to be a bit more of a satisficer. At the end of the day, it's all about actively choosing what you want to care for, instead of just accumulating.
Look, this isn't some call for extreme minimalism or anything like that. It's really about freedom. The goal isn't to have nothing. The goal is to make sure that nothing has you.
And that's really the question I want to leave you with. In this giant supermarket of life, are you just a passive consumer getting pushed down the aisles, or are you an intentional curator? The choice, as always, is yours.